Welcome back to Horns High Studios for a very special presentation from Murder Metal Mayhem. This is not a 666 video. This is something a little special. This is the 50th of these new videos that I've been doing. So I thought I'd do something special and do something that I've been talking about in the community tab. Some of you may have seen that. And so I wanted to talk about this and answer some of your questions. So you guys always have some really good questions. So I picked out some to go over with you. But again, these videos are for informational purposes only, not saying anyone's guilty or innocent. That's for a court of law to decide. So I've been wanting to do this video where I pick out some questions from you guys. I've done this before on our podcast. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. So again, I got the timer is not out. I'm not clocking myself here. I'm just going to go over these questions, but I do promise I'm going to keep it succinct and moving along. So don't worry about that. But thanks to all of you that had questions for me. There's some really good ones here. I think you guys will like this. And some did provide name and address, or not address, but a town where they're from, and some just screen names, but I'll read them as they were given to me. And I did narrow it down to 15. And I said I would answer any question that you guys had that relates to this channel, to the podcast, to true crime subjects, and my fiction writing as well. So that's what I asked for, and that's what I got. All right, so the first question. Sarah from Chicago, Illinois emailed me and asked, what made you decide to start the channel? Well, that's a good question, Sarah. Actually, I started this channel back in 2018 when we started the Murder Metal Mayhem podcast, which was April of 18. But really didn't do much with it. I mean, we posted stuff randomly, but most of the videos were longer videos, some interviews with bands, some different things that we posted just here and there. But that's really no way to grow a YouTube channel. And I knew that, but I was busy. I didn't have any free time to spend on this. Well, then I became semi-retired in the fall of 23. And one of my goals was to sit down and try my best to grow the channel. And so I started watching other true crime creators. And, you know, I've been talking about true crime on Murder Metal Mayhem now almost 6 years. So I kind of took all that stuff and came up with what I thought was a winning strategy, which was the 666 seconds videos. So that's what I've been doing since about mid-December. So it's been about 2 months now. And it went from 174 subscribers to just about 4,200 now. So that's why I decided to kind of do this push, Sarah, to help grow the channel, to help put the word out, to attract new listeners to Murder Metal Mayhem, the podcast. And it was a much bigger response, much quicker than I expected. I did not have any intentions of this working out, and I thought I would, you know, spend my newly found free time writing more books because I'm a writer as well. But that has since been put on hold while I'm dealing with this crazy YouTube thing. All right, great question. All right, Desi from Killeen, Texas emailed me. I think Richard Allen is being framed in Delphi. It reminds me so much of the Idaho 4 case. What do you think about it? Well, it does remind me a lot of the Idaho 4 case. If you're not familiar with that Delphi case, you really need to check it out. It's insane. It's actually, if you can believe it, crazier than the Idaho 4. I'm telling you, go do some viewing on that and you'll know that I'm telling you the truth. But I do think Richard Allen is being framed. It's crazy how similar his predicament is to Brian Kohberger to some. But I feel that he had nothing to do with it at all. I think I do think he's being framed. and we could go on and on about it. I've done some videos on Delphi. I will continue to do some. So if that interests you, go check those out. Rachel from Brooklyn, New York emails me and asks, you said you were from the Bronx in a video, but you don't sound like you have an accent. Why is that? Rachel, that's a damn good question. Well, I was born in the Bronx. I was there till I was like 5 or 6 and then moved away, still on the East Coast, but not in New York City. My parents have very strong New York accents still to this day, and they don't even live on the East Coast anymore and haven't for like 20 years. But I did have a slight accent when I when I moved away, but it was very slight. But I've been out in the Midwest now for over 30 years. So I think that's why my accent is just kind of diluted down and I sound just Midwestern or kind of neutral with my accent. But you guys can comment below and tell me if you think you hear any Bronx in my voice. But I had a lot of family in the Bronx when we moved. So, we would visit all the time. I was there quite a bit. And I mentioned probably where you got that from was when I mentioned that I was there during the summer of Son of Sam. And I remember my grandmother calling us in before dark because he was still out there. So that may be where you got that from. But you're right. And that's a damn good question. All right. K Hawkins 5925 posted in the community tab. What case have you researched where you felt the accused was innocent beyond a reasonable doubt? That's a really good question. And I bet if I really thought about it, Kay, I could come up with quite a few of these, but the one that comes to mind, and I would probably love to do some sort of extended deep cut Murder Metal Mayhem video on the West Memphis 3. That was the most ridiculous case I've ever seen, where those 3 guys had absolutely nothing to do with that crime. And that was during that satanic panic era. I've brought this up before when people have asked me why I do the 666 thing, which I'm going to talk about. There's a question about this later. But the West Memphis 3, I think that was a case, K, where they had absolutely nothing to do with it. And they were basically railroaded because they liked heavy metal and wore black heavy metal concert shirts, which is the most ridiculous nonsense I've ever heard of. But during the 80s, I think it was the 80s or early 90s, when that happened, yeah, that was going on. So Javier Mori 1710 posted in the community tab. I hope I got the name right, Javier or Javier. Aside from the obvious race issues in the OJ case, what was something you felt the defense brought up that helped his case? That's a really good question. This really made me think, Javier, so I appreciate that. I would say, because that was a 3-ring circus, as we all know, but I do think where the defense really made some serious, legit complaints was in the handling of the evidence, a mess with chains of custody and that sort of thing. And we know that's probably going to come up in the Idaho 4 trial, is how the police handled that evidence. And in that OJ case, that was big because they were not doing things the way they should have been. And that obviously taints the evidence. People would question, is it really legit, or is it, messed up because they put it in the trunk for the night, that kind of thing. So great question, Javier. Thomas from Oak Park, Illinois emailed me. Does it bother you when people say you creators are only doing this for clicks to get paid? That's a good question. I wouldn't say it really bothers me. I just kind of shake my head at it because the amount of work that I've put into this channel for the 2 months I've been doing this push, the amount of money I've received is pennies. Seriously, if you compared it like an hourly wage, it's not even worth mentioning, honestly. Now, if you're a big channel, 50, 100,000 subscribers. Yeah, those guys are making some pretty significant money. But I haven't made any significant money. But that's okay. I'm not doing this for that reason. I'm doing this because I want to grow the Murder Metal Mayhem brand, the podcast, and all that. So that's the only reason I'm doing this. And I don't really get paid doing that either. I just like true crime, and I want to let people know what I think about it. So that's why I do it. Eleanor from West Plains, Missouri emailed me, "What is all that crazy stuff in your studio? You guys see it behind me. Does it scare you to be in there?" Well, no, it doesn't. It inspires me to be in here, Eleanor. There is a lot of crazy stuff here. I need to do a video on a tour of Horns High, because what you guys see in this shot is nothing compared to the craziness that is actually in here. So I will do a video on that hopefully soon, a little tour to show the cool things I've got in here. I've got all sorts of stuff, and I think you guys will find it interesting. But no, it inspires me. I love being in here. It makes me want to be creative, and that's important. Francis from Winnipeg, Manitoba, that's of course in Canada, emailed me, "What was that like to interview Catherine Ramsland? And did you ask her about Brian Kohberger?" Good question, Francis. It was awesome to interview Catherine. She's so nice, very, very friendly, very personable, just a great person. And I really consider my friend. We had some mutual friends. That's how I approached her through Facebook. And she was cool with doing the interview, which shocked me because that was 2019 when I did the first one with her. And the podcast was new. Of course, Murder Metal Mayhem, I thought she would say, no chance. But she was totally cool with it. And then we did a second interview with her in 2020. And she had just come out with the BTK book, and so we were talking about that, and her Spree Killers book, I think, that she was working on. She's got so many books and things going on. She's unbelievable. But no, we didn't talk about Brian Kohberger because he wasn't known to me then. He would have been probably a student of hers at the time we did those interviews, but that was all he was then. So no murder suspect at the time. But good question, because I've had other people ask me that too. And what was it like to interview Nico Clos, the Vampire of Paris? That was very interesting. I got to say, of all the interviews I've done, that was probably the most intimidating, only because I knew I was speaking to a person that had murdered somebody, drank human blood, violated graves. I mean, that guy, wow, if you want to do some research on that, if that interests you. But that interview is here on the channel. It's a video interview that me and one of my co-hosts did with Nico. He was super cool. I mean, he did his time. It'd been quite a few years ago that happened, but it was fascinating. So go check that out if you want to on Nico Clos. Joey from Benton, Texas emailed me, "What is one true crime case that was so horrible you didn't want to cover it on YouTube or the podcast?" Well, I thought about this, Joey, and I thought about this. I can't think of one. We have done some absolutely horrible cases on the podcast, but the podcast is different than this. These videos are more PG-13. The podcast gets rough with the language, the discussions. I mean, it's brutal. So on the podcast, anything goes. And I can't think of a case that I would have turned down because it was too gruesome, honestly. Here, countless cases I wouldn't cover because, first of all, we do current true crime cases with the 666 videos. But you can check out some other stuff here. I've done some videos from the podcast that you can watch. Some different topics we've covered. So check that out, Joey. That might be of interest to you, a little more brutal than what I'm covering here. Esther from Roanoke, Virginia emailed me, why do you glorify Satan and use 666 like you do? I've explained this quite a few times, but Esther, I'll explain it to you one more time. And I get it, okay? I get it. First of all, I'm not doing it for any kind of religious reason. That has nothing whatsoever to do with this, okay? I'm not really a religious person, okay? But I talked about before that I'm into heavy metal, and I've been into heavy metal since the 80s, okay? And I mentioned just a minute ago about that satanic panic. That was a huge thing in the 80s and into the 90s. And you had all these people going crazy and saying everybody that listened to heavy metal was worshiping Satan and all this stuff. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, were there a few? I'm sure there were, just like there's people that worship the devil that maybe are school teachers or plumbers or bus drivers. But I did it, and on Murder Metal Mayhem, we've been using the 666 thing since we started, but more as a goof and more of a kind of thumbing our nose at those who used to say that all of us were devil worshipers and all that, because we're not. It's just because we like heavy metal, and it kind of goes hand in hand with heavy metal. And I get it that you may not understand that, because if you're not into that kind of music, maybe it's like, just seems stupid, and maybe it is, but that's what we do. Just like we throw up the horns, same type of idea. So nothing more than that, Esther, I promise. Rolanda from Yonkers, New York emailed me, do you do all your own research? And if so, are you hiring? That's a good question. No, I don't. Thankfully, I've got some viewers that have helped me. Juzzy from Australia has been great. Blogger Girl, she's been helping me. She's a viewer here. And also Yvonne has helped me with some information. So I do have some crack assistance with the research. I do quite a bit of it, but certainly not all of it. Those guys are really the unsung heroes here. So, but I'm not hiring right now, Rolanda, but if I ever am, you can submit a resume just like everybody else, but I'll let you know if that's a thing. Speaking of Juzzy, Lady Juzzy asked in the community tab, when did you start writing, and do you have any formal qualifications, or is it just natural talent? Well, thanks for that question. I appreciate that. So I write fiction. I write horror and suspense, thrillers, anything that kind of falls in that genre. Don't do like the hack and slash type stuff. I do more of the psychological horror, like The Shining and that kind of thing. Okay. But I am just a high school graduate. I did take a few college classes. I just didn't like it. I did take some college level writing courses, but I started writing when I was in 4th grade. So I've been writing for a long time. So I guess it would be natural talent. I remember the first time I ever wrote anything that I can recall was a story for my 4th grade class weekend project to write a story with, it started with, it was a dark and stormy night. So I sat down to do it, didn't want to do it, but my parents always made me do my homework right after supper. So I sat down to do it, and it was like the pen just magically wrote. I knew right then, boy, this is something I was meant to do. And I've been doing it ever since. So I've written hundreds of short stories, several novels. So I guess it's natural talent, but with a little bit of help from some teachers. I can't take all the credit there. Does metal music come into your ideas for books? Not too much. I could think of one story I did where metal was kind of part of it. But I've gotten a lot of ideas for songs when I used to play in a band from my writing. So I did use characters I created in writing for, we did a whole album based on a novel that I wrote. So I've kind of gone back and forth with how one influences the other, but they do kind of go hand in hand for me, metal or music and writing, both. And what book would you recommend to read first from your collection? That's a good question. I mean, if you like short stories, those are usually a good way to kind of get started. I have some free samples on my website. That's down in the links below, petealtieri.com. So you could read a short story from each one of my 4 short story collections if you want to check it out so you're not buying something that you don't like. But I would say the newest book I've got, which is Creation of Chaos 4, which is short stories, that would be a good one. If it's novels you're into, I would recommend Deeper Than Dead. That's a novel I wrote a couple years ago. That's got an interesting premise, so you can check out a chapter of that on my website, so you can read it before you buy it. But those would be my recommendations. Thanks for that question. Ann from Phoenix, Arizona emailed, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel. What advice would you give someone just starting out? Wow. Where do you begin? But I would say, Ann, the first thing you need to do is watch other creators doing what you're interested in, whatever that may be, and come up with a unique way of doing it, something different. Not the same as everyone else. So come up with something creative in that genre of whatever you're looking to do. And then come up with a plan of how you're going to do these videos. You could do them simple with a phone. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. I mean, YouTube makes this pretty easy, honestly. But that would be a good place to start. And then you want to be consistent. So if you're going to put out a couple videos a week, let's say, you put out a couple of videos a week. If you're going to try to do them like every day, then that's a tough pace to keep. But whatever you're going to do, you need to be consistent, and you need to keep, that quality level up. And like I said, that uniqueness, whatever that is, whether it's the way you talk, whether it's the subject matter, whether it's your background, whatever it is, something unique. Like I started that 666 seconds videos, which is kind of unique, and the timer and all that kind of stuff. So that would be my advice, but prepare for a lot of work, and if you want to do it seriously, but good luck. Bill from Tacoma, Washington emailed me, I happen to think Bryan Kohberger is guilty. What is it about that case that makes you think he's not? Doesn't the fact his DNA was there convince you? Well, there's a lot to talk about in the DNA, Bill. I just did a video just before I recorded this one on the DNA specifically, but that touch DNA is very, very incomplete. It's not considered reliable for evidence. It's just like a lie detector test. It's not admissible in court. So that's not meant to be, convincing evidence. It's just a tool that investigators can use. So that's how I feel about it. At first, I thought, whoa, DNA, I mean, they got him. I mean, he's the guy. And then as I learned more about touch DNA or transfer DNA, I learned that's not the case. You're just talking about some skin cells, which could have, rubbed off at a gun show. He was looking at that knife sheath, set it down, and somebody else bought it and did that crime. There's a million different ways his skin cells could have ended up on that sheath, and he may have never stepped foot in that house or known any of those victims at all. So that's why I feel the way I feel, Bill. But great question. Sharon from Toms River, New Jersey emailed, I love the fact that your videos are short, but sometimes I wish they were longer. And do you plan on doing any longer videos in the future? Well, thanks, Sharon. I appreciate that. A lot of people comment and compliment the short video format. But I am going to be doing longer videos. I have done some in the interviews I've done, but I plan on doing what I'm going to call the true crime deep cut videos. And those will be coming out here relatively soon. I'm going to be doing these videos with a co-host of mine. We're gonna give it a try with Blogger Girl. She did great in the video that's coming out this week when we did that. So that's the plan, and we'll pick a topic and we'll get into it. It'll be something more than 666 seconds would allow us to cover, but I'm not going to go on and on. It's not going to be hours long. They might be 20 minutes. They might be an hour. I don't know. I guess it depends on what we're covering, but I am going to be doing some. So stay tuned for that, Sharon. Jennifer from Perth, Western Australia emailed, where do you get those creepy masks in your videos, and how many of them do you have? My husband and I have noticed you change them every now and then. Very good observation, Jennifer. Very good observation. Yes, I rotate them around. Those masks come from a guy named Sick Rick, SIKRIK, masks.com. And Sick Rick is a friend of mine. He's in the Cleveland, Ohio area. He's got tons of these. They're really cool. Most of the ones I have are serial killers, but we do have some that are not. I've got, I think, 11 of them here in the studio. We got Jim Jones, Eileen Warnos, H.H. Holmes, Ed Gein, Richard Ramirez, Gacy, Albert Fish, Ted Bundy, Dahmer. We've got some good ones in here. They're really very, very realistic looking and definitely freak people out if they're not into that kind of thing. But yeah, well, I enjoy them and I like collecting them. We have wall mounts, so they look cool here mounted to the wall for the studio. Thanks for that question, Jennifer. Well, thanks to all of you that sent in questions or posted them in the community tab. I'll do more of this in the future. So if you guys are interested, in submitting a question, just keep your eyes open for that. I do want to thank the Horns High Club. You guys are awesome. I do appreciate you very much. And if you're interested in that, that's just $1.99. You can do that if you like. If you don't want to, that's fine too. And since this is not a 666 seconds video, I have a few more seconds to talk about the merch. I've had a lot of people asking about merch on our website. This is the one of the shirts we've got. We call this the zombie shirt for obvious reasons. But that's a really cool artwork of each of the four of us on Murder Metal Mayhem at the time. One of those guys is Chris, the guy throwing up the horns there in the back, CK. He's passed. And so this shirt is very special to us. This is the front, and this is the back of the shirt. And we also have shirts just with the logo. So if that's, a better design for you, we've got both of them there. And we also have these cool die-cut stickers. These are really neat, the way they're cut like that. So we have these on there too. We also have some activity books, but I don't have one of those at my fingertips here to show you. But you can get any of that stuff at murdermetalmayhem.com if you're interested. So, well, thank you very much for watching this. Again, I thank all those that submitted questions, and we'll see you next time.